Hello, everyone. So glad to see you all at this conference. So exciting that we all can be online this way. Susan Jennings became Executive Director of the Arthur Morgan Institute for Community Solutions, known as AMICS, in 2014. Since that time, she has partnered with the AMICS board to implement a new strategic plan oriented toward the support of resilient communities. She also led AMICS in the 2017 purchase of Agraria, a 128-acre farm on the outskirts of Yellow Springs, Ohio, which is being developed into a center for regenerative practice. Susan serves on the Village of Yellow Springs Economic Sustainability Commission, the board of the Greater Dayton Conservation Fund, and on the National Council for Agricultural Research Extension, and teaching on behalf of the Central State University. She also facilitates a community climate resilience class for the University of Dayton's Lifelong Learning Institute. And I have to say, as a longtime friend and a member of the board of AMICS, a former member of the board, I just got off a couple of months ago, Susan and I have been friends for a very long time. She originally was here in Massachusetts at UMass Dartmouth, where she and I did a lot of work together, me working at the community college, she at the local university. And it gives me really great pleasure to introduce Susan, and let's give her all a warm welcome with our claps. So Susan, welcome. Love to have you here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Nancy.
Nancy, what is AMICS again?
The Arthur Morgan Institute for Community Solutions.
Okay, thank you very much, Nancy. Thank you, Adam, and thanks, Ronnie. I feel really honored to be here today. I see a number of friends and colleagues are in the audience, and I'm really thrilled to be part of this. I have been especially interested in the comments on the side of people who are really interested in thinking about how they can be part of this important transition. And so I thought I'd start with my conclusion rather than my introduction. And the conclusion that we have come to here at Agraria and at Community Solutions about what it is that folks need to do now, that we need to do now as elders. And I would count everyone on this call as an elder, because if you're here, you've been thinking a lot about agriculture and where we are historically in history in terms of climate change and peak oil and the number of other challenges that we have. And it seems to us that the three things that we really need to do as elders is to nurture people in body, mind, and spirit. In terms of the body, we think it's really important for folks to understand that we need to be growing food everywhere because our food system is going to come under increasing challenges. In terms of the mind, it's really important for all of us to sort of center ourselves again and where we are historically, and to help people who see the coronavirus as a black swan or where we are as kind of a surprise, to help them be centered in the reality that we have been in a challenging time, if not collapse, for a number of decades. And then in terms of nurturing people's spirits, just thinking about the fact that we need to move into a Gaian view of the planet and the importance of recognizing the sentience of all life. And that while we're now struggling as a human species, that species across the planet have been struggling because of our actions for a long time, and that we are, as all of you know, in the center of a huge loss of biodiversity. So most of my talk is going to be about the importance of relocalization, and specifically the relocalization of food systems. I'm going to give a little bit of the history and of Community Solutions and what we're doing at Agraria, our Center for Regenerative Practice. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenges of the current food system, really just which a lot of us are understanding just over the last few weeks of how fragile things are internationally in terms of the food systems that we depend on. We're going to look a little at some international examples of what's happening with food systems, and then come back again to this conclusion of the things that we can work on together to be supportive of our communities as we transition. So the man that you see on the left-hand corner is Arthur Morgan, who is the founder of our organization. He founded the community, what was called community service in 1940, because he was really prescient about globalization and urbanization, which he saw as destroying rural life, and he saw it as also as problematic for democracy. The organization was a founder of the intentional community movement and the community land trust movement. More recently, you might recognize the film The Power of Community, which the Institute put together about Cuba's transition to organic agriculture after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Our most recent venture, and just about 3 years ago now, we bought a farm on the outskirts of Yellow Springs, Ohio. And Yellow Springs, for those of you who don't know, the geography of Ohio is in the southwestern corner of Ohio. We're in the middle of a lot of conventional farmland, and the farm that we bought had been corn and soy farming conventional corn and soy for several decades. So the soil was extremely compacted and really devoid of any kind of a life. And we are interested in transitioning it, or we are transitioning it into a center for regenerative practice. So one of the reasons that we are interested beyond the relocalization of the food system, the reason that we're interested in exploring regenerative practice, Ronnie went over a lot of the reasons why we might want to farm regeneratively. And as all of you on the call know, agriculture and climate change are really directly interlinked. There are estimates as high as 50% of our greenhouse gas emissions are produced by industrial agriculture. And of course, now we're seeing that climate change is impacting agriculture as well. We are also impacting our water systems. This is a picture of Lake Erie in 2019, and this is directly related to nitrogen running off of farms in the Lake Erie region. Here in our region, we're a #2 contributor. Excuse me, it's phosphorus in Lake Erie, but we are also a #2 contributor to nitrogen in the Gulf of Mexico. And in terms of climate change and water systems, you may have heard of the floods in the Midwest last year. It was so bad that most farmers, their primary source of income were insurance payouts. So it was very difficult for people to sow until very late in the season. And then we had a number of dry weeks in the summer that also made it difficult for crops to grow. So the result is that in Ohio, farmers are leveraged as highly as they were in the 1980s when there were so many farm losses, and farm foreclosures are also on the rise now. So at Agraria, as part of our Center for Regenerative Agriculture, we're envisioning how to support farmers in transitioning from conventional agriculture to regenerative agriculture. This is a vision of the farm as we hope to transition it. Our 4 major areas of focus are conservation, education, support of the local food system. And this map is a map of the farm with a vision of the restoration of Jacoby Creek, which is the wiggly black line that's going through the land. We're working with the Nature Conservancy on a restoration of the creek, taking out the non-native species and replacing those. We're also doing quite a lot of permaculture planting along the riparian zone. In terms of education and research, we're working with a number of local school districts on K-12 education. We're also working with several colleges and universities on research. One of our primary partnerships is with Central State University, which is a new historically Black college and university land grant institution. So we're working with them on research projects and education. We also do a number of conferences on farm and off. That's our beautiful barn. And on the farm itself, part of our transition is to, again, permaculture plantings. We have a compost system in the works. We just received a grant from Patagonia to develop a silviculture system. And we are also planning on doing rotational grazing. Ronnie did a good job of talking about the importance of bringing animals on the land and multi-story cropping for actually building soil. And one of our most challenging mission areas, at least until the coronavirus hit, or hit people's consciousness just a month ago, in our area anyway, is the support of local food systems. And you'll see Walter Yene there on the left-hand side. He came in to do a water cycle workshop with us the first year that we were open. We also work on SNAP program and with a local farmers market. But really, again, up until a few weeks ago or a month ago, most people in our area, and I think most people across the country, really saw local food or food security as really being primarily related to folks who were then hungry, and not really an issue for the community as a whole. So this is an example of what used to be grown in Ohio. Right now, although agriculture is Ohio's #1 industry, only 8% of the food that we eat is grown locally. On the other hand, just 150 years ago in 1870, you'll see the list of things that were grown just on the land of our farm, our current farm. And I know Massachusetts also had a really diverse system and was able to feed itself pretty regionally. So the question is, how did we get from there to, sorry, I'm having a hard time here. Let's see. How did we get from there to here? This is a sample of what goes into a Burger King cheeseburger, and you'll note the number of countries that are contributing different parts of the menu for a cheeseburger. And this is where we are right now. This is also where we are right now. And again, for those of you who do not see the coronavirus, but as a black swan, but as part of a number of challenges that have led to collapsing ecosystems and now collapsing global systems, you may recognize these books as people who have also been thinking along with us about the situation that we're in and the predicament that we're in, and that is not, that we're in the middle of, and is only going to get more challenging and not less. So you may recognize Kunstler's book. He's primarily dealing with all kinds of global systems and the need to relocalize. I put this David Korten book up as really an important, at least for me, genesis of my own thinking. This book is over a decade old. But David Korten, you also may recognize the name of Joanna Macy, who also talks about the Great Turning, really recognize that we need to move from globalization to relocalized systems, not only for economic stability and for equity and for health, all of which are really important, but because it's only by stepping back from globalization that we will really be able to start to restore the ecosphere. So, and from Joanna Macy's point of view and others, it's also moving from a sort of mechanistic view of the universe, which manifests in things like industrial agriculture, the idea that everything is linear and mechanistic, to a more Gaian or more holistic, almost holographic view of the universe as deeply interconnected. So now here we are on the other end, just 3 weeks in again to the coronavirus. On the left-hand side is a picture, and I know you've seen many of these online, of the amount of people who are now stressing food banks across the country. And at the same time, we have a lot of farmers. There's thousands of dozens of eggs and thousands, if not millions of gallons of milk being destroyed and crops being turned under, because our food system is set up in such a way that it's not resilient or redundant in the ability to reallocate food toward people who need it, but is really kind of locked in again to this globalized system of long food chains, long transport chains, large processors, larger farms, and really not able to sort of readjust itself to local needs. So now I'm going to spend just a little bit of time looking at 3 countries that both what we can learn from them and what they're doing, learn from them and learn what they're doing, because I just want to reiterate that we are, I don't want to say at the mercy of a global system, because the US, of course, is and US corporations are sort of at the heart of the push towards globalization. But we are also locked into this dance now with a lot of other countries who are trading partners of one kind or another. So a few years ago, I was able to visit Vietnam and many other Southeast Asian countries, had a chance to visit some farms. And just a couple really important points, I think. One is that Vietnam is still impacted, both the people and the land, from the impacts of Agent Orange, which is a defoliant that we used during the Vietnam War. And it's a reminder that a lot of our industrial chemicals were actually descendants of wartime chemicals and were repurposed after World War II to our industrial agricultural system. The other or that's reminder visiting Southeast Asia is how many of our primary ecosystems are really being decimated for monoculture farming, including in Southeast Asia for palm oil plantations. And then the other really interesting thing for me right now about Vietnam is that they, along with a number of other countries, are really exploring their own food sovereignty and the need to feed their own people. And so for now, anyway, Vietnam has halted all new exports of rice because they want to just make sure that they are able to take care of their own population. And food sovereignty, by the way, is a movement internationally. It's a lot stronger internationally than it is in the US. And it's basically the sense that countries and communities ought to be able to feed themselves first, and also ought to be able to grow culturally appropriate food. So these pictures are from Navdanya, which is Vandana Shiva's farm, which I was able to visit in January of this year. Most of you know Dr. Shiva's work against GMOs and for the preservation of seeds. She notes that before GMOs, there were 200,000 varieties of rice in India, and her work and many others' work in India is to start to preserve all different kinds of rice. This is her seed bank. It's really, really a beautiful farm and beautiful work that she's doing. Another interesting part of Dr. Shiva's work is that she works primarily through women farmers. She's worked with 750,000 farmers. And she notes, which I think is really important for us to know, that 70% of the 70% of the people in the world are fed by small-scale farmers, many subsistence farmers, and primarily women. And she also notes that the Green Revolution has really just decimated ecosystems and obviously farming economies in India and elsewhere. Also had a chance to visit Kerala, which is a state in the southern part of India. We have a long-standing relationship with a organization there called Agraria Heaton, which our founder also founded when he was part of Gandhi's rural education initiative after independence. So one of the things I find really interesting is that India in general, the farms are very small, primarily the average is 3 acres versus the US is now 450 acres, but they just grow an enormous amount of food. Here on the left-hand side is a rooftop garden. This woman on 1/3 of an acre grows enough to sell at a farmer's market, and then also to feed her family and many other members of the community. And these are some shots from Knepp Castle in southern England that I also had a chance to visit last year. Many of you may know the book Wilding. It's really a fabulous book that talks about wilding, both that they're doing at their farm. This Isabella Tree is a journalist, but also a co-owner of this farm. And it's a really interesting book. It's a great place to visit. A couple really important things to me were, first, that wilding, again, like food sovereignty being something that's happening across the planet, wilding initiatives are happening also across the planet. Lots of really exciting things going on. And the other thing that was interesting to me reading Wilding is that Miss Tree talks about how England, like the US, really built a lot of conventional agriculture or started a lot of farms during World War II, and that a number of the farming choices that are made in England are really based on subsidies, which, as Ronnie mentioned, are generally go the wrong way. So just to come back now to the United States, and because we can learn not only from what is going on across the planet and also what's going on in really important movements like the Real Organic Movement and Regeneration International, but we can also learn from our past. I know most of you know about victory gardens that came in World War II. There's a lot of people, again, as Ronnie mentioned, buying seeds and growing gardens. Here at Agraria, we've really, especially since we've been in lockdown, we've been working on moving a lot of our work online, and then again also exploring how we can help support the local community. And a lot of that is related to helping our local farmers maintain their livelihoods during this transition when things are hard because of their primary markets of restaurants and schools being closed. So recognizing that we need to support our local farmers, but then also that we really do need to grow food everywhere. So asking experienced gardeners to mentor new gardeners is happening. We're also encouraging local gardeners to grow an extra row for the food bank, both in Yellow Springs and elsewhere. And we're working on classes, online classes that we hope will be face-to-face before too long, but the online classes that we're working on are on seed starting and on container gardening and getting started in your own garden. And we're working toward, by the end of the summer, being able to do canning classes and seed saving classes to help people think about saving for the winter and then also for the next season. Then on the education end, we've had to move all our field trips online. This woman on the right-hand side is Emily Faubert. She's one of our naturalists. She's hugging a tree and talking to kids about how nature can be a great place to recenter yourself and to deal with difficult emotions that are coming up. She's also, the two pieces on the left are exploring what are the bugs that are coming up in the soil or that are present in our soil now. So basically all the things that might happen during a field trip we're doing online for local school children, and actually they're getting a lot more views than locally. The other thing, just to circle back to the spiritual part of this, we're working on classes for both young people and adults on this time as kind of a spiritual transition or spiritual dark night of the soul, or just the understanding that we are transitioning from a period of relative stability to a period of instability, but how all of the things that we're dealing with are dealt with better if we have a sense of perspective about what is happening, and also if we're able to share the transition with members of the community. And then also we're moving our conferences online. We sadly had to cancel a few conferences, so I've started to do a webcast series. These are my first 5 interviewees, Carolyn Baker, who talks a lot about, again, spiritual transitions and the importance of things like feeling our feelings. She's a big fan of Michael Mead's work and Joanna Macy's. I interviewed Vandana Shiva last week. Walter Yene in the middle is his webcast is coming soon. John Eichert, who is a food system analyst and who's really helping folks to understand that this is really a great opportunity to really relocalize food systems, because there's so much attention being paid now on the importance of food systems. And then Adam Sachs down in the bottom right-hand corner, whom I hope to interview soon. And just wanted to also make a plug that Bio for Climate and Communities doing a conference this fall. We hope it will be in person, but if not, we will do it online. It's called Pathways to Regeneration, Rewilding, Restoration, and Reciprocity. And our keynote speakers are Rowan White, who is an indigenous seed keeper, and Judith Schwartz, whom many of you in the Bio for Climate community know as the author of Water in Plain Sight and Cows Save the Planet. And she also has a new book that should be coming out very shortly on rewilding. So that's it for me. And I hope it all came through.
Okay, Susan, thank you very much.
Yes.
And so now we have about 15 minutes for Q&A. Do people want to, let's see, how should we do this? Shall we do it through the chat again? If you have a question for Susan, why don't you type it in the chat now, and I will relay it to her. Or Susan, can you see the chat window?
I can, yes.
Okay,
yes.
so you can field the questions yourself.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, I see there's a lot of comments. The idea of a platform to share is really important. And again, there are a lot. I didn't talk about the fact that we're working with farmers to get things online now. And there are, one of the things that I think is exciting about this idea of Blessed Unrest is that there's just so much online and so many models and so many platforms that people can learn from and draw on. So yes, I think the online piece for helping to share food and make sure that food is not wasted, or they're really, really important way forward. Let's see. So yes, Wilding, if I could make another plug, it's an amazingly beautiful book and an amazingly beautiful farm. But it was extremely interesting to me because I am so US centric, I guess, and thinking about conventional agriculture. It was really interesting to me how much of England's countryside has also been impacted by conventional agriculture. And again, a lot of their subsidies going the wrong way. The other thing I forgot to mention, but which I find really interesting, is that Brexit is a lot of the reason that people voted for Brexit was this feeling that a lot of folks, the things that people depend on day to day were being sourced from further and further away. And many people in Britain remember when they were able to eat really serve a lot of their own needs through local farming. Let's see, traditional indigenous knowledge. Yes, thank you for that. The question about the pre-colonization. We actually have done quite a lot of work in looking at indigenous farming, and as many of you know, regeneration is actually not that new. There are a lot of things that we know about mycorrhizal networks that were not available to know before the kind of microscopes that we have now, but certainly practices like the terra preta in the practices that led to terra preta in South America, and the deep topsoils in the Midwest, which were obviously from buffalo, but also from indigenous practices. And so, yes, we are making sure that we note in our education and in our own education, K-12 and adult, the importance of acknowledging indigenous practices, past and present. Let's see. Thank you for the question about the Garden Club of America. Actually, we have a lot of gardeners who are interested in work with us. These are people who have been fairly traditional gardeners, but I think, again, it's a really exciting time, both with the coronavirus, but I think, i.e. in terms of the coronavirus, of course, just people recognizing the importance of local food systems. But I think in general, there's been a watershed change of conventional farmers and people who haven't really been paying too much attention, I think, to what's happening agriculturally. There's just been a sea change of understanding of the importance of agriculture and the importance of regenerating agriculture and regenerating farming. So one of the things I really am excited about our work at Agraria is that we're not just, I don't want to say preaching to the converted, but we have a lot, we see ourselves as a bridge organization. We work with lots of schools. And again, interested in working with FFA and other young people. And as Ronnie mentioned, a lot of younger farmers now are really not wanting to repeat what their family's done, both because they see the damage that it's done, but then also because now conventional farmers are not making money. They recognize they're destroying their soil and they're not making money. So there's lots and lots of interest in transition. So we feel that we're in a good place right now, and just, yeah, very excited about our work. Let's see. So how far along are you on the restoration? Thank you for that question. So we took a lot of soil samples when we first started in 2017 and found very little fungal life. In fact, I think I'm not sure if this is the right number, but it was something like we found 86,000 parts per million of bacteria and 0 fungal activity in some of our soil. And we took tests again last year and our carbon content had increased and soil biology had increased like 20%. And that's primarily through cover cropping. And we've done a lot of organic soil amendments, or our farmers have, and we have not yet gotten animals on the land, but we're really looking forward to that because we know they're a really important way to build soil fertility. Let's see. From farmer, what are the favorite cover crops? That's, you know, I mean, I think one of the challenges, and I should recommend another book, David Montgomery, Growing a Revolution. One of the things he talks about, which I think is really, really important, is the fact of how we need to have model farms or pilot farms everywhere across the country, really across the planet, because farming is so regional, and what works in one state or one bioregion is not necessarily going to work elsewhere. And the other reason he talks about the importance of demonstration farms is that it is so complex for farmers to transition, and a lot of farmers can't really afford to, well, as he says, they can't afford to bet the farm. And certainly it's very difficult for farmers to transition hundreds of acres to organic or to regenerative, especially since, as Ronnie rightly mentioned, most of the subsidies really go the wrong way. They pay for farmers to do essentially the wrong thing, although there's a lot of work now on at both the federal and statewide level, including healthy soils legislation that's trying to change that. So I guess I can say what works in Ohio, but I think the most important thing for folks to do, and I know there are people on the call from lots of different places, but is to really look for the model farms or the demonstration farms in your area and see what their experience is. And better yet, think about joining some kind of a research group. There's one, for example, in California called, oh no, I'm not going to remember it. There are a team of farms in California who are working on a carbon project, and they're basically all researching the change in soil carbon on their farms, but they're doing it as teams, and that's also happening
I think that's the Marin County Carbon Project.
Yes, thank you, the Marin County Carbon Project. Thank you. Let's see. Wow, the beaver question's interesting. Okay, so this, there's a question that's a private one that asks about anything in the Farm Bill. I think the interesting thing to me is that 2018 soil health was included in the Farm Bill for the first time, and as part of my work with Central State University, I was at a land grant meeting in Washington at the beginning of March, and it was really very schizophrenic. We had one of the speakers was the American ambassador for the sale of agriculture, our trade ambassador for agriculture, who basically was lambasting countries who did not want to buy GMOs and did not want to buy Roundup, and basically said that, you know, American farmers need to feed the world, which I'm not sure that that's how American farmers think of themselves. So that was sort of the standard conventional corporate line of the meaning of American agriculture. At the same time, one of the speakers was talking about the new focus for USDA, emerging possibilities, and on the research end, I'm pretty sure it was NIFA spokesperson who said that the #1 focus for research was going to be in regenerative agriculture, and also agriculture in the face of climate change. So it's an organization like the rest of the country that's really deeply divided, but a lot of really hopeful things happening, both at the federal level and again at the state level, where there's a lot of work being done on healthy soils legislation. So let's see.
You have time, Susan, for one more question, I think?
Sure. Yeah, okay. Let's see. I'm trying to see one that I don't know the answer to lead and glyphosate in the soil. I guess I can say, though, that one of the reasons why we want to do research into soil amendments is that although we are in a rural area, we are around cities, including Springfield, Ohio, and Dayton, Ohio, that there's a lot of abandoned property. It's not quite like Detroit, but there's a lot of abandoned property that people are looking to regenerate. And at the same time, with the industrial history, there's an awful lot of lead in the soil. So to be continued, that conversation.
Ragweed is a plant that removes soil. Also look at what John Stamets is doing with mycelium.
Thank you.
But once you've removed it into ragweed, where do you then put the ragweed full of lead or glyphosate or whatever?
You can burn the ragweed and then dispose of the residue.
So the lead would stay in the ash.
Correct.
All right, well, it's lunchtime. So
quick follow-up question to the lead removal. Is 1 year of ragweed enough to remove most of the lead, or is that something that has to be repeated?
I'm not an expert, but I'm guessing it's something that you would need to do for multiple years, probably get the best extraction the first year, and then every year after that, the diminishing return. But